All right, guys, welcome back to the Hangar RC. My name is Sam, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to build an RC airplane from scratch. Now, this is going to be a high-level video. We're not going to go into a ton of detail. It'll give you a starting point and help you along from there. If you have any questions, leave us a comment down below. We'll do our best to answer them. And like and subscribe. All right, so the very first thing you want to do, oh, by the way, before I get started, welcome to the channel. If you're new here, this is the Hangar RC, welcome back. I want to send out a special welcome to the students of the Aviation and Aeronautical Design program at Utah State University and Utah State University Extension, or USU Extension. Welcome. To all of you who are regulars of the channel, welcome, and if you're new here, we hope you feel at home. We are doing this video as part of a beginner series here on the channel. This series is going to stretch out a long time, whether it's going to be 6 months, a year, I don't know, but we're going to definitely continue to do these beginner series so we can give you kind of an idea of where to start and how we do things here at the Hangar RC. Today's episode is sponsored by the Aviation RC Noob Podcast. Matt and Joe over at the podcast, they're the hosts. Today's episode is sponsored by the Aviation RC Noob Podcast. I want to give a special shout out and thanks to Matt and Joe over at the Aviation RC Noob Podcast. They're the ones that sponsors this episode. They're the ones that are sponsoring this beginner series that we're doing. Matt and Joe are two of the best podcasters out there. They cover, I think their first 50 episodes cover all the basics. From design to motors to props to ESCs, anything you need to know about the hobby, these guys cover it. Matt and Joe are amazing humans and wonderful individuals. They are good friends of the show here at the Hangar RC, and we love what they're doing for the hobby in getting you guys more interested and actually into the hobby. So thanks Matt and Joe, and thanks to the Aviation RC Noob Podcast for sponsoring this episode. Let's get to designing, shall we? Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our computer, and in this case we are 100% Mac based here at the Hangar RC. I know some of you are going to throw a fit about that and say, oh, blah, blah, blah. That's the whole Mac versus PC debate, iPhone versus Android, yada, 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 whatever. We use Macs because it's what we know. I'm a graphic designer by trade, and that is kind of our industry standard. So if you disagree with me, leave me a comment. We'd love to hear from you. We're going to go to our computer. In this case, it's a Mac. We're going to open up a browser. We're going to go, the very first thing I do is you have to decide what airframe you want to build. I've kind of done a little research. I know what airframes we already have, what airframes I want. And so in this case, I'm going to do a basic Cub. Lost my train of thought of what I was going to do. I'm going to do a basic Cub. So I'm going to go to my web browser and I'm going to do Cub 3-view. Now, if you don't know what a 3-view is, it's a side or profile, most likely a top. Sometimes it includes a 4-view or the underside, but most likely a top view and a front view of a specific aircraft or a car or anything you type in that is a 3-view, that mostly mechanical devices, man-made devices. But you type in, for example, I typed in Cub 3-view and it brought me up a whole slew of images, if I go to Google, of the Cub. And these, as you see, are all 3-views, obviously except for the live photos. But I'm going to pick one. And the key that I like to do when I'm looking for images as a graphic designer, if you scroll up to the top of your browser, up in Google, where it says Tools, and you click on Tools, and then you click over here, Size, and you click large, this is going to bring up the largest images that Google can find on the internet. And these are typically better to work from because instead of being a 72 resolution little 600 by 600 pixel image, these are going to be your biggest images. So if you look down here, it'll actually tell you the size of the images. For example, this image right here is 1240. If you look right down here in the bottom corner of the image when it pulls up, it's 1240 by 824. That's a lot better than a 600 by 600 or a 300 by 300 or a 300 by 400 image. So we're going to pick one that I like, that I can see. Let's see if there's any better ones. I'm just doing a quick scan. I'm going to pick probably this one. No, that looks a little bit pixely. And keep in mind, even though that it is 1240 by 824, it still may be pixely because if someone's just blown it up, it still may be a little bit pixely. This one looks like a really good one. This is 2000 by 1496. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to download this image. And on a Mac, you can right click it, you can go download to linked file as or download image. I'm just going to click and drag this image to my desktop. And what that allows me to do is it brings it right to my desktop. Then I can take this image after I've decided what airplane I want and I found a 3 view of it. I'm going to take this into my Illustrator program. Here at the Hangar RC, we use Adobe Illustrator. There's multiple programs out there that you can use. You can use Illustrator, you can use Inkscape, you can use, there's all sorts of programs. A CAD program if you have it. I know Spawns loves to use the CAD programs and he's amazing at it. I started off in CAD drafting and I used to know the programs, but since I've been a graphic designer for 22 years plus, I like Illustrator and it's just what I know. So if you can find a program, such as Inkscape or any similar type of program, you can do what we're going to do. The things are going to be similar in concept, the tools and the commands and everything, but for the most part, it's going to be similar. It may be a little bit different, but for the most part, you're going to be okay. So what I do, I bring my downloaded picture that I just downloaded, my 3 view, into Illustrator. Now, if you notice, I've opened this up in Illustrator, and this is a pretty sweet image. You typically don't find images that are this sweet on the web for 3 views. I see the 3 views, so this is a front view. It's a top-down view, so I get the shape of the wing, and it's a profile view. Typically, when I start designing, I start with my profile view. And what I do is I'm coming up here and grabbing my pen tool. I don't know if you can see that. This is called a pen tool, and this allows me to create vector lines. Vector lines are not resolution dependent. And what I mean by that is they are mathematical calculations of X and Y. So I can design something that's itty bitty, like 300 by 300 pixels, and I can take that design and blow it up to the size of a billboard without losing resolution or quality. It won't go pixely because these vectors are made up of mathematical calculations of X and Y. Okay, so if you have a raster-based graphic or a pixel-based graphic, such as a JPEG or a PNG, the bigger you blow it up, the more pixely it's going to be. So keep that in mind. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on my 3 view here, and I'm just going to come in and I'm going to start tracing my parts that I need. Specifically, actually, I'm going to go and change my color to an offensive color, which I typically pick pink. I'm going to come in here and just start tracing, and these are done by handles. Start tracing the outline of my plane on a profile. And remember, this isn't a Pro Series type of aircraft. It's not going to have rounded edges. It's not going to have those types of things for the most part. So a simple, what I would consider like a simple profile design, an extruded profile design, if you will, is going to be just fine. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to have to make a decision now that I'm towards the tail. Now that I've got the bottom of the fuselage done, I'm towards the tail. I'm going to have to decide how I want my tail to be. So I'm just going to come up here for now, and I may have to change this in the design later. Let me decrease the fill on that, okay? And so I'm going to have to decide how far I want my tail to come to join up with my fuselage. So I'm just going to go here for now. And you'll see what I mean later. And then I know it's going to come up to the wing. It's got a little bit of a scoop there. And don't worry, I'm going kind of fast in Illustrator. Remember, I've had 22 plus years of experience here in Illustrator doing this. It may take you a little longer, and that's okay. So now I know that my wing's got to sit with a little bit of incidence. So I'm going to make that just a little bit angled. And once again, once we do our glide tests and whatnot, we can adjust that and tweak that. Okay, so I'm going to come down to my windscreen for now. I'm going to come out here to the cowl. Now the question is, do I want this cowl to be round? I don't think I do. I think I'm going to just go ahead and make this a profile cowl as well. Remember, this is going to be a basic airframe. I'm going to make my cowl kind of round-ish. And then I'm going to actually, these little lines right here, I'm going to actually not choose to make those lines. Even though it's not very scale, I'm going to try to make this as basic as possible, right? So I'm going to come back up here, and I'm actually going to move this point down and readjust my, what are called handles on that point, and even my handles on this point. And that's going to create a more fluid shape when it comes to the front part of the fuselage and the cowl. Right, move this up just a hair, and I like that. So what I did basically is split the difference right here on the fuselage and the cowl. Now that I've got my basic shape of my fuselage done, a profile, if you will, I'm going to drag it out here so it's not on my picture anymore and I can see the basic shape. Now what I usually do is I come out to the vertical stabilizer and I draw it out. So I know it's got to start somewhere here, and this can be adjusted once again. I'm just drawing these points and dragging handles out. These little 2 dots that you see as I'm dragging them out, those are called handles in Photoshop, or sorry, in Illustrator. And that's what makes your curves. So now I'm just getting the profile of the airframe, or the vertical stabilizer, and rudder, kind of there, which is kind of okay. And then I know I stopped right here. So now I know I need to come vertical and then meet up with my point here, which this point's a little bit too far out there, so I think I'm just going to delete it and then make sure that this comes in perfectly straight, which it didn't, so I'm going to redo this. And then that can drop there, and then we're going to redo that shape just because we can. And now the thing is, I have to line this up with my fuselage. So what I'll do is I will take this vertical stabilizer down to my fuselage, fit it into place, right? And then I can take out this gap right here because I know that that needs to go down. Whoops. Whoops. Let's do this again. Come on. Even pros sometimes struggle with it. So now I know that needs to be flat. And then this probably should come down a little bit. Now in Illustrator, just so you guys know, not that any of you are going to use Illustrator, maybe you are. I know the students at USU are going to be using Illustrator. These, you can see your vectors. So right now these vectors, or these blue lines, those are the vectors. The red line on top, the stroke, is not a vector. That is a raster element. So what I'm going to do is if you hit Command or Control, I think on a PC, Y, that will show you the vectors. And you'll notice my vectors don't quite line up there. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that they line up. And then the next thing I'm going to do is, after I make sure all these vectors are lined up, which they are pretty good, I'm going to come back into Command Y or Control Y if you're on a PC again, and I'm going to come back up here and drag this back up to my shape and see if I'm remotely close, which I am, right? So that shape's pretty good. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the score line in for the rudder, and I know it's got to go like this, so I'm just going to go down to this corner for the time being. And like I said, these all may need to be adjusted depending on how your airframe comes together. So now that I've got that, I'm going to come up here and take this and bring it back down to my profile. And just like that, we have a profile with a tail, right, with a rudder. Now we know this rudder separate piece is going to have to tab into the profile somehow. So I can go ahead and I can create a tab that will tab in. And sometimes on my airframes, I like to create my tabs a little bit longer just to give them a little bit more grip. They don't have to be incredibly long. So we know the Adams Ready board is 3/16 of an inch wide. So you take 3 divided by 16 and that will give you the decimal point. So you can make this tab right here the thickness of a piece of foam board, or bigger if you want. So 0.1875, 3 divided by 16.
It's 0.1875.
So 0.1875 is 3 divided by 16. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to specify this tab, or sometimes I will even like to do 2 tabs because it just gives it a little bit more friction fit, if you will. I know you're going to be gluing these in, but it gives it a little bit more stability and makes it so you can glue in 2 different places. So now I'm going to come up here and make sure these are the right height, which are 0.0375. 0.01875. I don't know how I messed that one up. And then if you don't click the link button here, I'm going to go height 0.1875, enter that. Okay, once I've got my profile of my horizontal or vertical stabilizer done, then I'm going to come back to my 3 view and I'm going to go to the top view of my 3 view. And this is how I'm going to get the shape of my vertical or horizontal stabilizer. So I'm just going to come over here. I'm going to make some few quick marks here. That works. And then back to here and make this kind of pointy. And all I'm doing is tracing these, right? That's kind of what you do when you're doing a 3 view, is you're just going in and tracing the lines. Now, one thing I like to do, as opposed to, because I know this isn't 100% symmetrical, what I will do is I will only draw, let's get rid of this for a minute, I will only draw half of the object. For example, in this case, the horizontal stabilizer. So now I know I've drawn half, right? And I can delete that half. So now what I'll do is, because I want them to be perfectly symmetrical, I will take, I'm going to fix this really quick here. I will take this perfectly symmetrical shape, copy it, paste it, transform, reflect, and I'm going to reflect horizontal. And in this case, now I have a perfectly symmetrical airfoil and I don't have to worry about them being just out of symmetry, because I can't draw perfectly symmetrical. I don't know anybody that can. So now I've got my horizontal, my vertical stabilizer, my fuselage profile. Now, this is probably the point where I actually go to the foam board. And what I will do, minus my wing, which I know that the next part, my wing, is going to be a traditional fold-over style airfoil, just like we always do on a lot of our planes. It's got to have a flat bottom. It's going to have a curved top. I know that's going to be the case. I could do a symmetrical airfoil. I could do all sorts of things with this Cub in the design process. But in this case, I know that I just want a plain, basic, flat bottom, fold-over top, rounded top wing. So, okay, anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my wing and start drawing out the shape of my wing, right? It's going to be a traditional style, round top, fold over, flat bottom, and the name slips me. The name of it slips me for the moment, but if you know it, put it down in the comments below. And so I'm going to trace out the wing shape and then just know that it's going to be your basic fold-over type of wing, right? It's not going to be a KF airfoil, it's just going to be a traditional fold-over. So the next steps, what I typically do when I'm designing an airframe, is now that I've got my fuselage shape and my horizontal and vertical stabilizer and my wing traced out, I'm going to go start applying that to foam. And what I'll do is I'll export that, put it in the laser, and then be able to cut that out so I can start with that basic shape. Now, when I'm doing my test builds and my first constructions, before I even do my glide test or my glide slope test, I build without hot glue. I don't use my hot glue guns for my first initial build. I use tape. Why? Because then tape can be cut apart with very little effort, laid flat, and applied to a flat sheet of foam. That's why I use packing tape. I just tape it all together, and when I need to relay it back out, I cut it flat. So what I'll do next is I'll take the profile shape that I've created, taken the laser, cut two sides of it, so I have both sides of the fuselage, and then I'll determine how thick I want the fuselage to be, right? Which is, once again, this is basically an extruded or expanded profile plane. I will take that thickness and say that thickness is 2 inches, right? I will then create the pieces that I need on the top and the bottom of the airframe to actually create a dimensional object. Now keep in mind, I'm only going to use tape so that I can cut that apart and lay it back out flat. Let's get on with this. So once I've taken that profile out, cut it out, put it in and I start building it. I'm not going to show you that part because, once again, that's going to take a long time. Maybe we'll show you that process in another video. If you want to see that in another video, leave a comment down below. Once I have that taped version up, everything's been taped, the wing shape is done, then what I will do is I will load that down with where I think the CG should be. And if you want to use an online center of gravity calculator, they're all over the place. All you have to do is Google center of gravity calculator, and it'll take you to a website where you can calculate those points. I will add nose weight, including maybe even a power pod, just to get the motor on there and be able to have a place to put in the battery to give it the correct amount of weight to make that CG balance, right? And then once I do that, I'm going to take it out and chuck it and give it a good toss. If it flies across a room or across your front lawn or in a park, and it lands nicely without nosediving into the ground or stalling out, you know you've got a plane that's going to fly in the air. Now, let's jump back a bit and let's talk about the laser and what things you need to learn about the different characteristics of our laser the different colors that our laser uses. So I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to open up, let's say let's just do our 7. So I'm going to come in here to my laser cut files, and I will provide your instructor with a list of what these specific items are. These line colors that are important to our laser manufacturing process, I'll put a list right here or somewhere on the screen of what each line means. So if you come into here, and this is still Illustrator, you'll notice we have red lines, we have purple lines, we have black lines, and we have blue lines, okay? There's actually two different shades of blue. There's a light blue, kind of a cyan blue, and there's a darker blue, but for all intents and purposes, it's just blue, okay? You guys at Utah State University need to be very strict and very picky about these, because if you put on a wrong color line, I'm going to tell the laser to do something that you may not want done, such as you wanted to score and I'm going to cut all the way through. Not the end of the world, because you can always tape that score and make it work, but just keep that in mind. You need to be critical about the types of lines you're putting on your paper. So those are the types of lines we have. Now I'm going to open up our program. Once again, like I said in the last video, the program that we use is a program called Lightburn. Lightburn is a software that allows my computer to talk to our laser. So you'll notice on this Lightburn, and this is just the first sheet of the 7, you'll notice I have this outline, and I'm going to provide this file to you as a template in Illustrator. If you're not watching from Utah State University, I'll leave a link to it somewhere down below, or I'll post it somewhere in the comments so you guys can have the Illustrator file as well of the specific outlines and everything you need. So you'll notice this first line that we have is a orange line. Let's make this full screen so you can see it better. It's an orange line right here. This orange line is our last cut. This is the last cut that the laser will make. It is 100% cut through, and what it does is it takes the 20 by 30 sheet of foam down to our manufacturing size, which is 29.5 by 13. Okay, 29.5 by 13. The other thing you guys need to know in the design world, width always comes first. So that if you tell me I want an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, or your design on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, I'm going to create a document that is portrait, or that, you know, sits the long way up and down and the short way side to side. if you say that I want a 11 by 8.5, your document is going to be landscape. It's going to be longer or wider than it is tall. I hope that makes sense. It's a good thing when you're working with a graphic designer or any design. Width always comes first in the numbers. As long as we're on that same page, nothing will ever get confused. I'm gonna grab a drink here. My throat's getting pretty dry. As one of my other YouTuber friends says, non-sponsored drink of choice. The next thing that you'll see on this, we're just gonna work our way up through these different layers, is the cut-through layer. This cut-through layer is kind of a greenish color. That's just what I've assigned it. Technically, it's the black layers in your Illustrator document. So make sure you put those layers to black, or those objects to black. Quick side note, one thing you need to know about lasers, it will not cut an open object. So if you're drawing a shape, let's go back to Illustrator and show you this really quick and demonstrate this. If I'm drawing a shape, and I draw a shape, and say I'm drawing a square here. Say I'm drawing a simple square, and I leave my shape like that, even though it looks like a closed shape, let me give this offensive color so you can see it. It's not a closed shape. There's no line between here. The laser is just going to cut these, and you're not going to have a line for that to be. Likewise, or a line for that to be a closed shape. Likewise, if I have two shapes like this, and there's a small gap in there, and they're not perfectly aligned, let me zoom in on that so you can see, your shape is not going to turn out right. You need to be stricklers, so you need to be very, very, very picky about how you're drawing your shapes to make sure they're closed. The quick key to close these two shapes, let's say they were aligned. Let's just align these really quick. If I select both shapes and I do Command J or Alt J, I think it would be on PC, or Option J on PC, it will join those shapes, and now they are one shape. Hope that makes sense. All right, back to our Lightburn software. So you'll notice the bluish, greenish color. It's actually 27. This is the cut-through line. 100% cut-through, that is the shape of your airframe that will be cut through with the laser 100%. The next layer up is red. Red is always 100% score, 50% score. It's not always 50%, but it's close. So wherever there's a score line, it will be a red line. If you don't put it as a red line, there's not going to be a score line there. It's going to be a cut through, or it's going to be some other type of line. Okay? So we have those red lines as score lines. The next one up is a bright green. And although you probably don't need to know about this, this is something, these dang flies, driving me nuts. This time of year, they all come indoors. Get away. Anyway, the green, the bright green, I set this up because if you notice up here, this is where our firewall, and actually we have an elevator brace that goes on our 7 that goes right here. These go through quite a few sheets, not all of them, but I think if this is a 5-sheet aircraft, it goes, okay, it's a 5-sheet aircraft and it goes through 3 actual sheets of foam board. So that is just so we can fit in our kits, mainly for manufacturing purposes and to make things nice for our end user or our customers. That's so we can place our firewall and our other parts that we 3D print in that area, okay? So that's cutout part. I will provide you with these cutout parts as well in that same document. Your barbecue skewers, your push rods, you are going to have to remember to make areas or spaces for those specific parts as well. Okay, the next one is our purple layer, which these are the graphics that are outlined. So the laser's not going to fill in this or burn, for the best way I can put it, burn the surface of that. The laser's just going to go on and outline this 7 logo. It's quicker, it doesn't take as long. That's why we do some graphics as outlined and other graphics as non-outlined. For example, the sheet size down here in the corner, the sheet number, not the sheet size, the sheet count and the version is in that graphics outline because it takes a lot less time to do that than a graphic like our logo here that is filled. The filled graphics just means that the laser is going to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, minuscule movements at a time, like you're talking less than a millimeter, just the width of the light beam, and it's just going to go back and forth until that area looks like, you know, when you were a kid and you make treasure maps and you take a cigarette lighter and you kind of hold your under your paper and you burn a little bit of it. It doesn't burn all the way through, it doesn't make it black, but it kind of browns the paper. That's what the laser is doing, except it's doing it less than a millimeter at a time, back and forth, all the way up that graphic. So that's what the fill graphics are, the black graphics, right? Now don't get those confused with your black cut lines. In the program, in Illustrator, you're going to be making black cut lines. These other fill graphics, I'll worry about them. I'm just giving you this for a reference so you kind of understand our manufacturing process. Graphics outline, once again, it's just going to outline those graphics. It takes about 1/100th of the time that it does to fill in a graphic. So it's just going to outline those really quickly and you can still read it, but it's not going to fill it in. It's not going to look as nice, but it's not going to fill it in. Quick review, the green is our cutout parts, such as for barbecue skewers or for firewalls, control horns, your push rods, that type of stuff. Red is always score 100% of the time. Cut through is kind of a green color, but on your Illustrator document, it's going to be black. I know that's a little bit confusing. I apologize. It's just when I was learning the laser, that's what I set it up to be, and that's the way I created my templates, and so that's the way it's always been. Just so you know, you'll be using black. When I put it in the laser program, it's actually this forest greenish color. And then the last cut, which is the actual cut down from the 20 by 30, is orange. And we do that last because some of your sheets of foam board are a little bit warped. And if we do that first, then what it does is as the laser travels across it, we actually put pressure down on the sheets to make sure they lay somewhat flat. And as the laser travels across that, if we cut that sheet, that last cut first or somewhere in the middle, the laser will go out of focus and it won't be as clean as cut. Now, if it goes out of focus, it's not the end of the world. It'll still cut through it, but it will burn more of the paper on the either edge of the cut versus a nice clean cut. Just, there you go. There's Laser Basics 101. I think that's just about it as far as the manufacturing process. If there's anything else you want to see me cover, please leave a comment down below. Also, for you USU students, I'm going to be talking to your instructors and your professors to see if we need to continue this series, if there's something else that will help you out. If there's something else that will help you out in the future when you're not in this class, let us know down below. We want to do more of these types of videos. Once again, thanks for watching. We really appreciate it. If you haven't liked this video or subscribed to our channel, please do so. It helps us beat the YouTube algorithm beast or monster or whatever you want to call it. It helps YouTube to know that we are worth watching, we are worth your time. So please like and subscribe. If you want to be notified when we release content, hit that notification bell. A couple shout outs before we get out of here. First of all, shout out to USU. We're glad to be working with you. We're excited to be working with you. We're super stoked for you students to get into the community and get into building an RC, and hopefully taking you along this RC journey will continue not only in your professional career and help you out with your professional career, but you will continue to do RC and love the hobby. And we hope to bring as many people as we can, so go ahead and share this video with your friends and share the hobby with your friends, because that's what's most important. The last item, Aviation RC Noob Podcast. Once again, without their support, we wouldn't be able to do these videos. We wouldn't be able to do any of what we do. They're a major support, major sponsor of our channel and of us as the Hangar RC. We really appreciate Matt and Joe. Go check them out on all your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Last but not least, I want to send out a personal thank you to you guys, because you guys are the reason why we can do what we do here at the Hangar RC. Go out, make a memory, fly with your friends and family, bring someone into the hobby, teach them about what we do. Let's keep this hobby alive, and we will catch you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.